Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Friday, October 20th, 2017, and you're tuned in to episode 356 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. Our top story of the day is the big news out of my home state of Maine that our governor, white supremacist Paul LePage, is trying to push back by a full year the implementation of the adult use legalization ballot measure passed by voters in the fall. Regular listeners should remember that Maine state lawmakers will be meeting in special session next week to vote on a proposed set of rules and regulations that have been developed by a legislative committee during a months-long process. It's not a perfect piece of legislation, with the recent addition of a clause requiring towns to opt in to marijuana sales rather than having to opt out, drawing the official condemnation of Legalize Maine, one of the groups behind last year's successful votes. But if passed, the current proposed rules would allow adult use sales to start up next year. Not if Governor LePage has his way and is able to pass through a special bill he just submitted, drafted by House Republican leader Ken Fredette, who says that state lawmakers were not able to handle the complexities of legalizing marijuana in the time they've been given. In response to that claim, both the Republican and Democratic chairs of the legislative committee say that the LePage administration delayed and outright ignored the process and any requests made for their assistance. With state lawmakers set to meet next week, we'll certainly be checking back on this story as it develops. Click over to the Portland Press Herald for all the details. Tom Angel over Marijuana Moment has the story of a move in New Zealand to bring the question of marijuana legalization to the entire nation in the form of a ballot measure, which would make it the first country in the world to do so. Yesterday, a new minority coalition government agreement was announced between the Labour Party and Green Party that includes a plan to let New Zealand voters decide via ballot initiative on whether to legalize adult use cannabis in the 2020 elections. I'm not super caught up on all the details of parliamentary politics, but as Tom's pointing out, the coalition will need to maintain their position in government if they want to get the legalization ballot to the voters. This is another good one to open up for the full read. Our final top story of the day is the big news out of Canada that the Canadian Air Transportation Security Authority has stopped calling police when airport screeners discover medical marijuana during airport searches. Their previous policy when finding properly documented medical marijuana on travelers was to call in police to have them verify the patient's legitimacy. Under the new plan, they will forego calling the police and just let medical patients go on their way with their medicine. This policy change doesn't apply to anyone caught carrying marijuana without a valid prescription and only covers up to 150 grams for registered medical patients, which, to be fair, is a respectable amount of cannabis. The new change went into effect at the beginning of this month. Kudos for sensible Canadian marijuana policy. Those are our top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz out on headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, the MJ Today Daily Century Club, those patron listeners giving at the $100 month level and higher. Century Club members enjoy knowing that they're playing a big part in helping bring you all the marijuana industry news and headlines you need to know every day, and they get the added perk of the $200 a month in ad credit that rolls over month to month and never expires. Those credits can be used here on this podcast or on our weekly show, Marijuana Today. Join in with current Century Club members like Ben Larson of Gateway Cannabis Incubator, Troy Dayton over at the Arcview Group, Chris McCabe of McCabe Law LLC of Portland, Maine, industry lawyer Elizabeth Nichols, and Rob Smith of the Atlas Plant Trainer. To add your name to the ranks of the Century Club members, just head over to mjtodaydaily.com and find that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. Sign up at the $100 a month level and higher, and boom, you're in the club. Once again, that's mjtodaydaily.com, big blue button that says Become a Patron. All right, time for the Blitz. A group of former and current police chiefs and prosecutors are calling on the Trump administration to rein in the Department of Justice and U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions from his charge to return to the head-cracking good old days of the 80s and 90s when the solution to every criminal justice problem was to lock everyone up in jail for longer. The group Law Enforcement Leaders to Reduce Crime and Incarceration sent a letter to both President Trump and Attorney General Jeff Sessions to remind them that the U.S. crime rate has actually been going down for the past 25 years, and the way that was achieved was not by indiscriminately tossing people in prison. In their letter, the group also pressed for the need to focus on fighting violent criminals rather than nonviolent drug offenders. You can click over to the Washington Post if you'd like to scope out the full letter. The Massachusetts Cannabis Commission announced their hiring of a new executive director yesterday in the naming of Shawn Collins. Mr. Collins was one of 3 final candidates to be considered and currently works as the Assistant State Treasurer of Massachusetts. In one of those stories that hints at the new future we're all building by pushing for progressive marijuana policy reform, there's a headline out of Colorado of a new pair of police puppy dogs that were just bought by the Rifle, Colorado Police Department, who will not be trained to signal for the presence of marijuana. Thanks to a ruling earlier this summer in a Colorado Court of Appeals, police dogs in the state who are trained to sniff out marijuana are not allowed as permissible sources of evidence in drug cases due to the fact that marijuana is legal. The Rifle Police Department recently retired their veteran police dog Tulo from active duty, and thanks to some fundraising by a local 12-year-old, was able to buy 2 new replacement pups, who will never be trained to smell cannabis. Turning back up to Maine for a headline, we have the story of a medical marijuana patient being searched by hospital security staff at Maine Medical after she informed medical workers that she was a registered patient. When the security officers searched registered medical marijuana patient Shirley Weiss, who lives with PTSD and anxiety, they found her medical gummies in her purse and seized them. The medicine was returned to Miss Weiss when she checked out, but she's not happy about how things went down, telling WLBZ2, quote, "They were talking to me like I was some sort of criminal. You know, I haven't broken the law. I didn't break any law. I wasn't dispensing it or selling it to anyone," unquote. We have another story up speaking of the friction between local and federal marijuana law, with a bank in Washington state shutting down the bank account for a clothing company because it uses hemp cloth in their products. The Umpqua Bank has around 350 branches spread out over the West Coast and told Washington state-based clothing company Organique that they were no longer welcome to bank with them because they were in a, quote, marijuana-related industry. We've definitely seen this story lots before, but it's usually a medical marijuana or adult use company that's hit, not hemp clothing, which is about as far from smokable cannabis as a 2x4. The Canadian province of New Brunswick just announced a request for proposals for 15 retail spaces in which legal marijuana will be sold. New Brunswick is one of the Canadian provinces that announced plans to centrally control legal cannabis sales, handing over responsibility to the program to NB Liquor, the state-run organization that similarly handles the alcohol industry. It hasn't been made explicitly clear who will actually run those 15 marijuana retail operations, with government officials saying that it would work with, quote, an other entity, unquote, without divulging who that other entity might be. Each of the 15 retail spaces will be at least 3,000 square feet and will need to be completed by the end of May. And finally for today, Alan Brockstein over New Cannabis Ventures has the news that the state of Ohio will begin accepting applications for marijuana processor licenses between December 4th and 15th, inclusive. Applications carry a $10,000 non-refundable fee on top of a $90,000 fee for successful applicants and an annual renewal fee of $100,000. Click over to New Cannabis Ventures to find a link to the posted 24-page application. Those are headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again on Monday with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our Twitter account at MJTodayDaily and visit our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, the MJ Today Daily Century Club, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.